What really happened to Ada Haridine? In a world full of disappearances, hers stands out. No evidence, no clear answers, just a haunting question that still lingers. Was it a simple case of a woman running away from her life? Or is there something darker at play? The truth might be buried deeper than we realize. Ada Haridine wasn't a household name. In fact, most people knew her as a quiet and reserved woman who worked as a volunteer at local shelters. She had a reputation for being kind-hearted and dedicated to helping those in need. But when she disappeared without a trace, the entire town of Brooksville was shaken. What could have caused such a dramatic turn of events for a woman who seemed to have everything under control? Who was Ada Haridine, really, and what did she know that may have led to her disappearance? Ada's story becomes even more intriguing when we consider the connections she had, both personal and professional. Was her quiet life truly the way she wanted it to be, or was there a darker undercurrent in her world that we were never meant to see? It was the evening of October 12th when Ada Haridine first disappeared. The cool air of fall settled over the town of Brooksville, leaving a trail of golden leaves dancing in the streets. Ada, an energetic yet quiet woman, had always been a regular at the local community shelter. She had a routine: work at the shelter, take a walk through the park afterward, and then head home to her small apartment. That evening, she told her neighbors she would be out for just an hour, enjoying the crisp autumn evening. However, an hour passed, then two, and still there was no sign of Ada. By midnight, her absence became alarming. Ada was reliable. If she wasn't back in her apartment by dark, she'd leave a note. But there was no note, and she wasn't answering her phone. Her neighbors began to speculate, some worrying aloud that she might have had an accident. The police were called, and a search began. Ada's car was the first clue found. The 2011 Honda Civic sat parked at the edge of the park as though waiting for her return. Everything appeared in place. Nothing was disturbed. But inside the car, a sharp sense of unease began to take over the officers on the case. There were no signs of a struggle. Ada's purse, with her phone still inside, sat neatly in the front passenger seat. She'd left everything behind, as if she had simply stepped out of the car without a care. It didn't make sense. As the days turned into weeks with no new information, the mystery of Ada Haridine's disappearance grew colder. Her case made local headlines, but there was little progress. Despite the efforts of local detectives, there were no witnesses, no signs of foul play, and no clues that could point to what happened to Ada. But there was one thing everyone knew. Something wasn't right in Brooksville. Beneath the surface of everyday life, dark secrets often lurk, waiting for the moment they're exposed. Some disappearances are fleeting, seemingly unsolved and forgotten, but others become haunting mysteries that linger in the minds of those who are left behind. This is the story of Ada Haridine, a woman who vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a trail of chilling discoveries. Ada Haridine was a woman who led a simple life. At least, that's what everyone thought. She was a quiet volunteer at a local charity, a regular face in the small town of Brooksville. Yet, the evening of her disappearance would change everything. What happened to Ada Haridine, and why did she disappear? Was it a random act of fate, or was there something darker at play in the shadows of this seemingly peaceful town? In this video, we'll delve into the mystery of Ada Haridine's vanishing, uncovering secrets hidden beneath the surface of her life and the dangerous forces she may have unknowingly stepped into. Could it be that Ada's search for truth cost her everything? Join us as we unravel the twisted web of corruption, betrayal, and unanswered questions surrounding Ada's disappearance. Months after Ada's disappearance, the investigation took a new turn. The initial search had yielded nothing concrete, and yet the whispers in the town only grew louder. People began to wonder whether Ada had simply walked away from her life. Maybe she had grown tired of her small-town existence, tired of the pressure from her community and the demands of the shelter she worked for. But as the investigation continued, new facts began to surface that painted a very different picture. The police started looking deeper into Ada's life, and they uncovered a hidden side to her, a side no one had known about. Ada had started spending time with a man named Richard Foster, a local businessman with ties to powerful figures in the town. At first, the connection seemed innocent enough. Foster was a regular donor to the shelter where Ada volunteered. However, the more they looked into Foster, the more the police realized that he had a shady past. Foster had been involved in several legal disputes regarding fraudulent property dealings and had been under investigation for corruption within the town's development projects. Yet each investigation had mysteriously ended without charges being filed. It seemed as if someone in the town's government was protecting him. Through further digging, the police learned that Ada had met with Foster multiple times in the months leading up to her disappearance. She had even attended one of his high-profile charity events, an event that was considered the social highlight of the year in Brooksville. What made Ada's involvement with Foster so suspicious was that she had begun to confide in a few of her close friends about certain shady dealings she had discovered. It wasn't long before Ada began avoiding public spaces, cutting ties with several of her longtime friends. She had withdrawn from everyone except for Foster. But it wasn't just Foster that had caused concern. Ada had also become increasingly fixated on uncovering something she had stumbled upon during her work with the shelter. She had begun researching the charity's finances, convinced that money was being funneled from donations to corrupt leaders in the town. Was this the reason for her withdrawal? Was Ada getting too close to the truth? After weeks of searching, the investigation took a sudden turn when an anonymous tip came in. A local resident, a man walking his dog in the park where Ada's car was found, claimed he had seen her the night she disappeared. According to his testimony, Ada had been seen entering a dark-colored sedan, accompanied by two men. The witness couldn't identify the men at the time, but he remembered them being calm and composed, like they knew Ada well. He could hear snippets of their conversation as he passed by, but nothing seemed particularly unusual at the time. The information was vague, yet it provided investigators with their first real lead. The two men were identified as Richard Foster and Edward Black, a powerful local real estate developer with deep political ties. Both had previously been involved in public controversies, but no legal action had ever been taken against them. Black, in particular, had connections to the city's mayor, a powerful figure who had been accused of taking bribes in the past. With this new lead, the investigation began to focus heavily on Foster and Black. The witness was able to provide a description of the car, but without concrete evidence or security footage, the police could only investigate further. Was Ada involved with Foster and Black willingly? Did she know too much, or had she been coerced into joining them for some reason? The ambiguity of the witness's statement raised more questions than answers. One thing, however, was clear. Ada was in deep with people who could very easily control her fate. As the investigation into Ada's disappearance intensified, investigators delved deeper into the lives of Richard Foster and Edward Black. What they found was both surprising and troubling. Foster was known for his property development projects in Brooksville, but his involvement in politics was more subtle. He had a reputation for funding campaigns for local candidates who had close ties to both him and Black. In fact, the two men had been working together for years, building a network of influence that reached into every part of Brooksville, from the local government to charitable organizations to the development projects that were lining their pockets. The more the police uncovered, the more it became clear that Ada's research was becoming dangerous for them. Ada had become a threat to their carefully constructed empire. She had discovered discrepancies in the charity's financial records that led directly to Foster's real estate company, a company that appeared to be profiting from fraudulent schemes in the town. In Ada's journal, the entries revealed that she had planned to meet with a reporter from the local newspaper, a meeting that could have exposed everything. It was also uncovered that Foster and Black had been involved in illegal land dealings, using the charity as a front to funnel money into their accounts. Ada had been getting closer to connecting the dots, and it seemed likely that she was on the verge of exposing everything. The question was, did she know the risks of her involvement, or had she been naive? As the investigation progressed, a confidential informant came forward with key information that sent shockwaves through the case. The informant, who had worked with local government officials, claimed that Ada had been under surveillance long before she disappeared. Foster and Black had caught wind of her investigation and feared that she would expose their crimes. Ada's life was in danger, and the informant said that someone had warned her to stop digging. Further investigation revealed that just days before her disappearance, Ada had been scheduled to meet with a reporter from the Brooksville Gazette to expose the scandal she had uncovered. Her journal entries indicated that she was terrified of what was to come, but she knew that if she didn't act, she would never be able to stop the corruption that had been festering in the town for years. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together. Ada had uncovered corruption that reached into the heart of the town's political machine, and those who stood to lose the most were willing to do anything to silence her. Was she murdered? Did she run away, knowing the danger she was in? As the investigation continued, the pressure to solve Ada Haridine's disappearance reached a boiling point. Every clue uncovered seemed to lead to a dead end, and yet there was one last lead left to explore: the contents of Ada's personal belongings. While investigating her apartment, the authorities found something chilling: a hidden drawer in her desk, tucked away behind papers and old files. Inside the drawer was a collection of documents, receipts, and a notebook filled with cryptic notes. At first glance, they seemed like harmless bits of everyday life: meeting notes from her job at the charity, contact information for clients. But there was one key item that stood out. Tucked in the back of the notebook was a series of emails printed on paper. These emails had been sent to an anonymous source known only by the pseudonym Watcher. The emails contained coded messages that detailed meetings with several people who were known to have connections to Richard Foster and Edward Black. It became clear that Ada had been in direct contact with Watcher, a whistleblower within Brooksville's government who had been feeding her information about the corruption and criminal activities taking place. In the final email she had sent, Ada expressed growing fear for her safety, as the walls seemed to be closing in on her. One email in particular stood out: "They know. It's too dangerous now. They're watching me, but I can't stop. I have to finish this." This was Ada's last known communication before she vanished. The police now realized just how close Ada had been to uncovering everything. She had been in contact with someone willing to expose the truth, but the question remained: who had access to this information? Could Watcher have played a part in Ada's disappearance? Or had someone close to Ada betrayed her? As the investigation deepened, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, but the more they uncovered, the more complex the mystery became. Months passed since Ada's disappearance, and the case had grown cold, but the investigation was far from over. New leads had been uncovered, but each seemed to lead to more questions than answers. Despite the overwhelming evidence pointing to Foster, Black, and their associates, the authorities struggled to tie them to Ada's vanishing and to the dark network that had entangled her. Then, out of nowhere, a breakthrough came. A former employee of Foster's real estate company came forward with information that turned the investigation on its head. This source, who wished to remain anonymous, claimed that Ada had been seen at a private party hosted by Richard Foster just days before she disappeared. The employee described a tense interaction between Ada and Foster, where she had confronted him about his dealings. She knew too much, the former employee said. She'd figured it all out. Ada was trying to bring it all down, but they couldn't let that happen, not after everything they'd built. The police had always suspected that Ada's disappearance was tied to the corruption involving Foster and Black, but now there was a confirmation that she had confronted Foster directly. It seemed that Ada had reached a tipping point, gathering evidence and preparing to expose the scandal. But at that party, she had been cornered, perhaps threatened or even manipulated into silence. Despite the increasing weight of evidence pointing to Foster and Black, the question of Ada's whereabouts remained unanswered. Was she still alive, hidden somewhere, or had the powerful figures in town ensured she would never speak again? The disappearance of Ada Haridine had taken on a life of its own, and with every new piece of information, the truth seemed further out of reach. The police began to entertain a disturbing thought. What if the entire town was involved? What if Ada's disappearance was the result of a conspiracy much larger than they had ever imagined? The more they dug into the powerful figures behind the scenes, the more it became clear that Ada had not just vanished, she had been erased. The pressure of the case mounted as the investigation veered into uncharted territory. While the authorities had begun to uncover the scale of corruption in Brooksville, they had yet to unravel the full extent of the hidden network Ada had discovered. The deeper they dug, the more layers of secrecy they uncovered. It became clear that Ada was not working alone. Her interactions with the Seekers, an underground network of whistleblowers, had placed her in a dangerous position. This network, a small but growing group of activists and former insiders, had been carefully gathering evidence to expose the town's darkest secrets. And Ada had become their strongest ally. Through encrypted messages and clandestine meetings, Ada had learned of the illegal practices going on behind the scenes: bribes, blackmail, money laundering, and she had become intent on bringing it all into the light. The Seekers had warned Ada of the risks, but she had pressed on, determined to make things right. But what had Ada uncovered? The more investigators spoke to former members of the network, the clearer it became that the town's corruption was far-reaching. Foster and Black were just the tip of the iceberg. The network of power extended into the highest levels of government and business, with each layer protecting the others. But Ada had managed to infiltrate the very heart of this operation. The Seekers had given her access to classified documents that detailed illegal land deals, the diversion of public funds, and the manipulation of elections. Ada had been close to exposing everything when she disappeared. Had she been silenced before she could blow the lid off the entire operation? The investigation took another shocking turn when a package arrived at the police station. An unmarked envelope containing a series of photographs. The images depicted various locations around Brooksville, all tied to the land deals Foster and Black were orchestrating. What caught the investigators' attention was a set of pictures that included Ada, taken just days before her disappearance. The photos showed Ada in the company of several local officials and business people, all of whom were connected to Foster and Black. But one photo, in particular, stood out. It showed Ada standing outside a local hotel, talking to a well-dressed man who was clearly involved in the town's political machine. This photo was the missing link that had eluded the authorities. The man in the photo was someone they had not yet connected to the case: Mayor Thomas Goodwin. Goodwin had been a longtime ally of Foster and Black, and he had been involved in many of the shady dealings that Ada had uncovered. The question now was, how involved was Goodwin in Ada's disappearance? The police began to re-examine Goodwin's involvement in the case, and soon a disturbing picture emerged. The mayor had been aware of Ada's investigation into the town's corruption, and he had been desperate to stop her before she could expose the truth. It became clear that Ada's disappearance was not just the work of Foster and Black. It was a coordinated effort involving the highest levels of power in Brooksville. As the investigation moved forward, a dark revelation came to light. Sarah, Ada's closest friend, had been secretly working with the very people Ada had been investigating. Sarah had been in contact with Richard Foster's associates and had provided them with critical information about Ada's investigation. For weeks, Sarah had been feeding information back to Foster and Black, trying to keep Ada in the dark while they prepared to deal with her growing threat. Sarah had been blackmailed into cooperating, but her betrayal was no less devastating. Ada had trusted Sarah with her deepest fears, her hopes for justice, and her vision for exposing the corruption that had plagued their town. But now, as the truth came to light, it was clear that Sarah had played a pivotal role in Ada's disappearance. Had she knowingly helped orchestrate her friend's fate? Or had she simply been used by the powerful forces that controlled Brooksville? The line between loyalty and betrayal had blurred, and the emotional toll on Sarah was evident. Could she live with the knowledge of what she had helped to enable? The investigation was now at a crossroads. With Sarah's betrayal weighing heavily on the case, the police began to wonder. Did Sarah directly contribute to Ada's disappearance, or was she merely a pawn in a much larger, more dangerous game? Months had passed, and the investigation into Ada's disappearance seemed to be at a standstill. Despite the overwhelming evidence of corruption, no one had been arrested, and the case remained cold. That was until a breakthrough came when a local resident came forward with an eerie encounter. This person, a bartender who worked late hours at a nearby pub, recalled seeing Ada the night before her disappearance. According to the bartender, Ada had entered the bar alone, looking distraught and disheveled. She had sat at the bar, nursing a drink, her mind seemingly elsewhere. The bartender had struck up a brief conversation with her and learned that Ada had been upset about a meeting she was supposed to attend the next day. Ada had told the bartender that she was meeting with someone important, someone who could help her expose the corruption she had uncovered. She spoke with conviction, but there was a hint of fear in her eyes, fear of the people she was going up against. The bartender remembered her words clearly. "I'm doing the right thing, but I don't know if I can make it out alive." This statement chilled the bartender to the bone. Ada had known that she was in danger, but she had felt compelled to continue her investigation. Had she been on the brink of exposing the entire network when she vanished? Or had someone gotten to her before she could act on her plan? The bartender's account became a crucial piece of the puzzle, confirming what many had suspected. Ada's disappearance was not a random event. Someone, likely Foster or Black, had ensured she wouldn't be able to reveal the truth. But who had taken her? Was it someone close to Ada? Someone in her circle who had betrayed her trust? With the case at a breaking point, the authorities pushed harder than ever to uncover the truth. Then came the unexpected. An anonymous source reached out to the police, offering one final piece of the puzzle. According to the source, Ada had been seen the night of her disappearance, not in the car with Foster and Black, but being forced into a dark van by two unidentified men. The anonymous source claimed that Ada had been apprehended and driven to a remote location outside Brooksville. The source provided coordinates to a nearby industrial complex, a place known for its shady dealings and underground activities. The police rushed to the location, and there, in a dilapidated warehouse, they found what they had feared: Ada's body. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. Ada had been killed. Her body showed signs of struggle, but there was no conclusive evidence to tie anyone to her death. The investigation had come full circle, but the true identity of her killer remained a mystery. Was it Foster and Black, who had the most to lose from her exposure? Or was it someone else in the town? Someone who had been part of the cover-up all along? The final reckoning was still to come. The town of Brooksville would never be the same. Ada Haridine's death was a reminder of the lengths to which people would go to protect their secrets. The case of Ada Haridine remains one of the darkest chapters in the history of Brooksville. Her disappearance and the eventual discovery of her tragic end uncovered a web of corruption, betrayal, and hidden truths that many were desperate to keep buried. While the identity of her killer may never be fully revealed, the impact of Ada's courage lives on. As we reflect on her story, we are reminded that sometimes those who seek the truth pay the highest price. Ada's investigation into the corruption at the heart of her town cost her life, but it also shed light on the dark forces that controlled Brooksville for so long. Her legacy serves as a cautionary tale, a warning to those who dare to expose the truth, no matter how dangerous it may be. What do you think happened to Ada Haridine? Was she betrayed by those closest to her, or did she simply get too close to something dark and powerful? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Beneath the Surface to uncover more mysteries hidden beneath the surface of crime and corruption.